So on this broadcast, I talk with Layton Barker about the trouble that he's having trying to get a sustainable housing development going in Devonport. Issues like TAS networks, like funding, like the banks. It shouldn't be this hard, but it is. But if you're interested in this sort of thing, especially with the housing crisis impacting so many Tasmanians, then listen on. So welcome to the broadcast. Today I've got Layton Barker here with me. So Layton, let's talk about building, construction, the housing crisis, and what you think we should do about it. So just give us a bit of a rundown on you and your business and your activities.
Yeah, okay. I suppose my working life has mostly been spent in the manufacturing area, doing electrical switchboards. Great business. Everything was, all good, but that wasn't where my heart was. My heart was in construction, whether that be renovating, building, basically anything along those lines. Just love to see things being built. So basically, I thought, well, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be too old to do it. So I sort of bit the bullet, sold the business, and sort of tried to take on property as a full-time career.
So you've got a passion about developing property, and at the same time, in Tasmania, there's a housing crisis. So just describe the housing crisis as you see it.
Yeah, look, it's. I guess it's a lot bigger than what I thought. I guess my adult life, earlier in my adult life, I thought, well, homeless was wasn't a huge thing, as in you sort of see the occasional person sort of on the street, and I assumed that, it may have been due to substance abuse or just unemployment, just, a choice. But the more I've done, the more I've looked into this housing crisis, the more I've realised that it's not the case. It's families, it's working families that just simply cannot get a house. They may even have a reasonable income, but just there is not enough supply available.
So I've been talking for a while about supply being the issue here, and we really need to increase supply across the board, but especially in that sort of social housing space. So how do you see that playing out, and why do you think we're not building enough houses?
Well, it is a case of supply and demand, as you say. It's I guess the prices of rent are going to go up because there's more people competing for one property, whereas if there was more properties competing for a tenant, then obviously that would drive the prices down. The reason I see that we're not building enough houses is it's simply too expensive. I guess you're either the land itself is expensive, the build process is time consuming and again expensive. As a family, if you were to, I suppose, want to build a new home, you're stuck renting or paying off an existing mortgage while you're trying to build a new home. Not really achievable for most families. So therefore, most families will, instead of building a new home, will look to, I suppose, change their home to an existing home, which then unfortunately doesn't increase supply, which is where the issue is. Obviously, the social housing, I think we dropped the ball. I guess the need for it hasn't really changed. It's probably actually, it has increased, but I don't think the number of dwellings that were being built was keeping up. It's basically, supply and demand.
So we've got one of the most, and I've talked about it in the past, one of the most frustrating things that I have is that I have a lot of people come into the office basically desperate for housing. They come in, so for example, we've only just recently, mother came in, 3 kids, the rental property, their rental property's finished because the landlord wants to do renovations and they've got very few options. And that is across the board. So they would hope to get a social housing, so get into a housing property. But even to get a rental is a massive problem. And I've also heard of businesses who've recruited, for example, an engineer to the Northwest Coast. It's taken them a long time to recruit. And that person has arrived, given themselves 3 months to find somewhere to rent. so that then they can bring their family down. And they've failed to find anything suitable. And so that engineer that took a year to recruit has turned around and gone back to the mainland. So I think you're right that this is across the line, across the board.
Yep.
So it's not just at one end, it's at every end.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the people who have the least financial capacity at the bottom end of the housing market are the ones that are really getting squeezed.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's, it's sad, especially for those that have got families they're trying to look after. I mean, as a parent myself, you want to do everything you possibly can for your kids, and putting a roof over it's one of the main things, I guess.
But one of the really good things is that we've got people like you, Layton, who actually want to do something about it. So let's just talk about that. So you actually want to do something about this housing crisis. So how did that motivation come about?
Well, I guess my having kids myself was a huge one. I've sort of, I suppose, over the last 5 years, you sort of start to think, well, hang on, unless I'd like to think my kids are going to be okay. I'd like to think that I'm sort of working towards having a secure future in a house. But a lot of their mates that come over to our place and that, I'm thinking, well, their mates from school, I'm thinking, chances are, some of these people aren't going to be, are going to get left behind, and that's sad. And I think it's sad that sort of, I guess, the dream of home ownership is actually, to a certain extent, gone. From our young people, they're, I guess, it's almost seems unachievable. So therefore, I suppose their priorities or their, housing over here is just too hard. So let's try and, do stuff over here, which I think is sort of problematic. Obviously for their long-term future, but also for for generations after, that follow. So I think the problems, unless we change this trend, I think the problem's going to get worse, a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and supply.
100%. Yeah. I mean, you've only got to look at the recent pandemics. We had toilet paper crisis there at one stage. There, I mean, the price of toilet paper, it's hard to get hold of. So therefore, we joked we had toilet paper on Marketplace for $20 a roll, sort of thing. But that is the reality. Is that if there isn't enough supply, there is more competition to buy or rent, and it only drives prices up.
So let's just talk then about 9 Fenton Street in Devonport. So you just run us through 9 Fenton Street, so how you came about it, and then we can talk about what you'd really like to do with that site.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the goal was to build a medium density, affordable complex aimed at first home buyers, almost like a studio style apartment. The first home in a good location where they could sort of walk to work, I suppose get their foot in the real estate market. So that I set out to I suppose maximise that site. So I designed a complex with car parking underneath. It's only a small site.
So let's just talk about the site itself. So for people who don't know where 9 Fenton Street is, just have a rough description. So it's very close to the CBD in Devonport. In fact, it's probably, you could claim it is within the CBD of Devonport.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's, I think, 200 metres to the mall. It's basically within a kilometre of pretty much every service that you could possibly need, whether that be Centrelink or whether it be doctors, rehab services, etc.
And it's an empty site at the moment. There's a few cars parked there, and it's not, you don't have to knock anything down.
No, correct.
So it's a fairly level. It's got a retaining wall around it, but it's a fairly level site.
Correct. Yes.
And ready to go.
Yeah, 100% ready to go. I even had council approval, ready to go. Had a builder lined up, ready to go. It's basically it's ready to start running services in and actually getting things on the go.
So you're talking about like an an innovative style of building as well. So
Correct.
almost the townhouse approach, is it? So where you have a car underneath, and then
Yes, yes. So literally, it was I suppose picture the first level of an underground, multi-story car park. So basically, the first ground level was car parking, and then above it, the units, all sort of in a nice row facing north, so to get great sun. But each unit was fairly small, but they were certainly more than adequate for a first home, or for a couple, or an individual.
so they were how many stories in total?
It was just 2 stories, including the car parking.
Right.
So yeah, basically
The car park and 1 story on top.
correct. Yep.
Right. So we're not talking about a development that you'd think anyone would get upset about. It's not going to tower over anything. So it ticks a lot of boxes from that point of view, close to town.
Yep.
And you
100%.
wanted to hit it in the affordable space, which is even better.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, it went through the council approval. There was not one objection, which I didn't think there would be. On the north side, we've got a church who I've had many chats with, and on the other side, it's on a corner, so there's a road on the other side, and then backing it's a house which the existing retaining wall was sort of higher, basically the same height as what the building was going to be, so it wasn't going to block any of their sun views, anything like that. So it was fairly, unobtrusive, I suppose, to a certain extent. Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's ticking a lot of boxes. So where did things sort of go off track a little bit then?
Yeah, well, I guess I was, had the council approval done, had the builder ready to go. I suppose one of the last things was just making sure that what I envisaged they would sell for and what was realistic, sort of lined up. They did price-wise, but I was speaking to an agent and they mentioned that the size of the units may be an issue due to, I suppose, the banks don't like to lend for small studio apartments. In fact, they won't lend against those as equity. So that would sort of take out the first home buyers. That left me with pretty much investors then looking for, say, an Airbnb or for a rental property, which I suppose still helps, but it sort of wasn't really what I wanted to I suppose achieve. So then I sort of looked at increasing the size so I could meet the minimum standards for the bank for first home buyers, which reduced it from 10 apartments down to 8, which again was all, it sort of all added up. Spoke with Tas Networks about getting power to the site and found out that even though it's in the CBD, there was very limited power available for that site.
Oh, wow.
Which surprised me. I thought that was sort of a
no-brainer.
Yeah, pretty much. I thought if it had been out in the suburbs and all the rest of it, I thought that fair enough. But in the CBD, I thought that was sort of a no-brainer. So they did some monitoring on it on the transformer that supplies that site, and they came back and said basically you're limited to 100 amps, which I suppose wasn't going to be sufficient for the 8 units that I wanted to do. So that meant then culling the numbers again back down to 6.
Or would they give you an option to upgrade the transformer, I suppose?
Well, it cost me $1,100 to do the monitoring.
Wow.
And then they said it was going to be $8,500 to $9,000 to provide a quote to, I suppose, give me an extra 60 amps of power. So I thought, well, if started doing numbers in my head, I thought,
Yeah.
well, $9,000 or $8,500 for a quote. I thought we're not talking sort of a $15,000 upgrade here. We're talking this is going to be a lot of money. So I didn't bother going down that path.
But I just find that incredible that in the CBD of Devonport, there is a constraint of the ability to supply power that is stalling development. I just find that's incredible.
I do too. And like I said, I didn't think that was going to be an issue. I just thought that was just, basically going to be a tick the box, tell them how much you need, and away you go. But no, not the case.
So like the numbers of units got culled again.
Yes, correct.
So
we
down to went
yes,
from 10
to 6.
6.
And then that sort of made I guess, having the parking underneath and the units on top, that sort of, I suppose, the infrastructure I needed to have the units elevated, a lift and everything like that
Yeah.
that I needed to have in place, I suppose started outweighing the benefits of having, I suppose I couldn't divide that, the land and that infrastructure for the lifting. I had to basically divide that by 6 units rather than 8 or 10.
Yeah.
And then it became sort of, I guess, numbers didn't line up, quite simply.
So then you've got to sell $1 million apartments all of a sudden.
Correct. So that sort of lifted each unit up by, 30 odd thousand or 40,000, whatever it was. And then it sort of started to get out of that realm of being, I suppose, I guess, a fair price. So then I looked at redesigning it again, but put the units back on the ground with parking at the front. Which the numbers started to line back up again once I got rid of that the lift and the uprights and all the rest of it. The only problem was then that it then went from being classified as an apartment, being 1.8 metres above the ground, to basically just being a unit on the ground, which changed the private outdoor space requirements. So it went from being, say, 12 square metres to, I think it was 30 or 40 square metres, which I guess we just didn't have the land.
On the tight site.
On the tight site, exactly. So although the council was, really good, the rules are there that, it wasn't achievable. So I've sort of...
So there's no, in planning sense, acceptable solution to that?
Not really. They've suggested maybe looking at shops underneath with units above.
But then you've got parking requirements for shops as well. So.
Correct. It's and then trying to have sun, it's I suppose it's become quite difficult.
Well, I mean, this is just highlighting a massive problem, isn't it? So you've targeted, you wanted to do like an affordable housing development, but everything from what you're saying is pushing you towards doing a bigger development.
Yep.
So it seems like if you were going to try and justify this economically, you'd want to be doing, to justify, for example, a power upgrade, you'd need a bigger development. So you might even need another story. And then to meet the banking criteria, you need bigger. So it seems like everything is pushing you into, like as a developer, to go for the more expensive end of town, just so that you can make all the dollars stack up.
Correct.
Which seems really ironic.
It is, and again, not the market I wanted to go for, because I sort of brought it back to what I wanted to help, I suppose, first home buyers. So it's just left me with I suppose in limbo. I don't actually know which way to go at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's because it's such a great site. It's a shame that that there's nothing there to start with. But if you don't come up with a solution and it's empty for longer, then it's even worse.
It is, and I thought the site's fantastic in the fact that the Youth Family Connections Centre is
right across the road.
Yeah. There's all the services that anyone could possibly need are easy walking distance. Employment opportunities for youth that possibly don't have cars. A lot of our youth work in retail or hospitality. All those employers are within nice walking distance. Whereas, if you had to catch a $15, $20 taxi ride because there's, buses are sort of finished when your shift's finished as a hospitality worker, it sort of makes that shift almost not worth doing. So therefore, whereas if you could walk 200 metres to and from work, you sort of basically you're keeping your whole wage rather than sort of wasting that on taxi fares or Ubers or whatever.
So it ticks a lot of boxes. But so you went down the road then of trying to partner. So you had a bit of a chat to Homes Tas. So just go through sort of that process. And there was like a program to help fund projects like yours. So just want to talk about that process. So where did it start? How did it go?
Yep. So I approached Homes Tas with the idea, the concept, and sort of and I guess asked if they were interested. Long story short, they were sort of fairly restricted to what they could do. They have a tender process that they have to follow. So long story short, they weren't able to or interested in looking outside that tendering process. They suggested I speak with the not-for-profits, which I have and did. I guess the general response from those was that insecurity of their funding. Although they'd like to invest and sort of do more, they really didn't know what their funding model was going to be from year to year. So they were sort of hesitant to I suppose take that gamble and invest in real estate themselves. Which was, I guess, again surprising. But yeah.
So which stage were you at when you had a look to see if you could partner? So were you at the 10 unit stage?
Yes, I was. Originally at the 10 unit stage, I sort of thought there's perfect for either youth or transitional accommodation. They're compact, they're easy, they were sort of, I guess, very low maintenance and quite robust. So there was,
and also approved by council.
And approved and ready to go.
Yeah.
I was surprised at that stage that they weren't more interested. They did mention other tenders coming up, which I did hang around for and apply.
So what were those tenders? Just describe that.
Yeah, so there was a tender out for, I suppose, a medium density sort of incentive program where they wanted to, I guess, any developments above 25 units or more, they would look to purchase 10% of those units. So, you build 25, they'll buy 3. I guess.
Now, from what I understand, the uptake on that program has been zero or virtually zero.
Well, there was one. That was me.
But you didn't qualify, did you, because you were 10 instead of 25?
Yeah, well, I had to redesign to meet their accessibility and all their other requirements that they had for for height of car parking, etc. I had to redesign the project again. So I went in there with an offer of 6 units, either to purchase 3 and I'll retain the other 3, or purchase all 6 with hoping they'd purchase all 6. Surprisingly enough, they came back and sort of said, look, it's no. Long story short, no.
Yeah.
But it felt more like there was excuses rather than reasons. But reading between the lines, I don't believe that Homes Tas were actually behind this tender. I think it was more of a government-led tender, push for tender to try and sort of boost these housing numbers quickly. But again, not surprisingly, there wasn't anyone else out there that wanted to build 25 units and with a guarantee
sell 3. Yeah.
3, yeah.
So one of the issues that's been raised with me in developers is basically that the numbers don't stack up at the moment because of the building costs. So even in Hobart, doing a large 25 unit development, even using tilt-up slabs and trying to minimise building costs, they're still looking at prices of, $1.5 million for the 2 to 3 bedroom apartment, which the market won't bear. So
correct.
It's
and I mean, and obviously the Hobart market's one, and then the northwest market's another one. So I mean, yes, the numbers just don't stack up at the moment. They did have an incentive program for me to again try and incentivise medium density developments. They were offering 10 grand per apartment, which was, I mean, it was. I think the incentive was correct. The numbers still couldn't stack up for me. So I think if that had have been say 30,000, I think that would have been enough. That's how sort of.
Yeah, you're getting very close.
We're getting, I'm not doing this to try and make a squillion dollars, but I don't want to sort of, be going backwards, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
If that would have been probably enough to sway the project into gear. So I think that was a good idea, but I just, the uptake probably wasn't there because the number probably wasn't quite high enough.
So what do you think government could do? So it's an obvious problem. The housing crisis is an obvious problem. We see the demand. We see the economic problems out of it. So people not being able to move to Tasmania for jobs, but we've also got the real social crisis with people sleeping in their cars. And yet, what do you think the government can do? The government are talking about how they've built 4,000 houses where they're counting vacant blocks and they're counting beds in shelters, and I've been very critical of that. But what do you think the government should actually be doing?
Probably in general more. I guess the vacant lot, they have actually reversed that. So now they are actually only including, after a bit of pressure from people like yourself and the public, they have actually reversed that, and they're now only including houses that have been started building on. But again, it's that there's so much more that could be done. For one, they've been buying a lot of properties that either are already fit for purpose, whether they be a motel or a unit complex. Their preference should be to build new.
Add to supply,
basically, rather than sort of taking away, taking it from here and moving it and putting it over here. We're not fixing anything. We're just sort of making
shuffling the deck chairs.
Yeah, pretty much. So, the preference should be to build new, unless there's, I guess, say an old hospital or something that's either just not going to be used for anything. It's just going to be derelict. Never going to, nothing's ever going to change there. But if that's different. But if we're talking, a motel or an apartment block that's is fit for purpose for renters or whatever, or for short stay accommodation, well, yeah, why take that off the market? Build new. I would have thought a no-brainer, but yeah, it doesn't sort of happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, Homes Tas should be a great model. They've got a large balance sheet, which, remember Peter Gutman, when he announced the creation of Homes Tas, was talking about leveraging this huge balance sheet. But it doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. And I think that the government is in the process of actually restructuring. They're going to have a new CEO and a whole new model. I mean, what do you think about the Homes Tas model itself?
In general, I don't think it's working at the moment. Margaret, I can't actually remember her name, but she was in. She did a piece on a review on Homes Tas, and she actually highlighted that there's a bit of a disconnect from what the housing minister, etc., are saying and what they're trying to achieve, and then again what Homes Tas are trying to achieve. There's a
disconnect.
Yeah. And that was sort of, I suppose, a bit of an eye opener for me. I sort of thought, well, Homes Tas probably aren't delivering what they should, but that sort of gave me another, I suppose, view that maybe it's not Homes Tas, maybe it's just this not working in unison, this disconnect that, so I guess too many chiefs, not enough Indians, sort of, working in different directions.
And also they've got that the two roles, haven't they? So managing housing properties and trying to develop.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
When I think one of the things that we've really wanted is to separate the two. So take the management of housing properties back into government and then have Homes Tas just more as a developer. That's that was one thing that we'd like to see. But also during the election campaign, we spoke a lot about this issue. Probably didn't get as much airtime as I would have hoped because of other issues. Let's say there was a lot of focus on one issue, which is one construction project.
Correct. Yep.
But we proposed Renew Tas, which would be a government developer who would partner with developers like yourself potentially to actually get projects off the ground. So what did you think about that policy proposal, and how could we improve it even?
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that you actually want to genuinely do something with the housing is a good first tick. It is a big issue, and it should be a big focus for governments, not just to win elections or whatever, but it should be a number one priority, because it is a real problem for Tasmania, or for Australia in general. There was a few dot points there that you had in there that I guess identify and activate suitable public land for housing and urban renewal. Well, yeah, 100%. Let's do that. The next one, you sort of mentioned that you wanted to acquire dormant and strategic sites. Well, I guess how the government have performed probably doesn't lead me to sort of, I'd rather see the existing projects sort of happen first. I think it may be a slightly better approach to actually work with the developer on those projects to actually get the ball rolling again. Quite often these projects have sort of got the plans done, everything's ready to go, but same as me, just couldn't get the numbers to stack up.
Yeah, the financial hurdle at the end.
Yeah, so I guess maybe if, there was a discussion of, what's stopping it, and let's overcome that hurdle, might be I suppose a faster or a more streamlined approach to actually get that completed, rather than sort of say, well, let's buy that land and we'll come up with something. But the fact that
so what we talked about was de-risking development as well. So you're facing all the risks yourself. So at times it's not just about the zoning or the height limits and things like that. So part of what we were thinking with Renew Tas was to get the sites and de-risk them and then put them back into the market for development and partner with a developer as well. So, or I think a very flexible model where we could partner with a developer like yourself to get these projects off the ground. But also, you've talked about the financial hurdles, obviously from banking, but also, so for getting the finance, the people who are potentially going to purchase your properties having financial hurdles because of the requirements for the bank. You've got requirements for, power. You've got requirements for council. There's all these requirements. The 3 out of 25 model that was talked about in the past wasn't enough to get you over the line. Where do you think you'd see a development? Let's say you went with your 10-unit development. How many units do you think you'd want to have an agreement for that would have got that project off the ground?
I think for most, you sort of needs to be 30%.
30%, yeah.
For me personally, it could have just been that extra 20 grand incentive would have been probably enough to suppose to get this ball rolling. So I think every development's going to be slightly different, but I mean we need to come up with some across the board policies to try and get the majority of those across the line. But yeah, de-risking is definitely a huge thing. I guess it only takes one objection or one hurdle to derail a whole project. And when you're talking sort of mum and dad investors, or
so obviously you're not a major corporation with very deep pockets.
Correct. Yes. Hence why I didn't I sort of wanted to make sure all the I's were dotted and T's crossed before I suppose went that next step. but it doesn't take a lot to derail a project. And when you're sort of talking, $500,000 for a block of land and all the rest of it, unfortunately you still need to make those repayments whether the development's progressing or not. So if it sort of gets delayed by 6 months due to objections and having to go back through that all that approvals process again, it would it could undo a lot of people, which is unfortunate.
But obviously, rescoping the project a number of times has cost you money as well.
It has. Fortunately, I guess with the location and the way the site is, I have been able to lease it out as a car park. So the whole time it's pretty much been
there's been some income.
There's been some holding income, which has been good. But if that had have been, say, a residential block or something else, it would really hurt. So again, if we sort of had I suppose, especially if we had land developments with pre-approval, like you've sort of suggested that, or basically a scope to, basically as long as your house is within the sort of
building envelope,
restraints, then it's going to be straightforward. Well, I think that would certainly help. And I guess if we could sort of speed up that objection process and, an approval process, that would also help as well, because holding a large amount of money or debt is very costly. And that was sort of one of the, I was sort of looking at, I guess, for my project alone was sort of, I'm looking at sort of $90,000 just in interest alone. So that sort of that's a big chunk of, the mark, your profit or whatever, or the hopeful profit at the end of the day. So,
so every delay just chips away at the eventual profit. Yeah. So what do you think the future holds for that site then? Where are you at?
Look, I've had to, I suppose, take a little bit of a step back and sort of reevaluate what I want to do. I still want to do the initial affordable housing on it, or a transitional style accommodation. That still is the goal. But maybe I just need to, I suppose, wait till the timing's right, whether that be a tender from Homes Tas that comes in, or whether that's an incentive program again from Homes Tas, or whether that's a shift in the market, I suppose, where it's still in that bottom, I suppose, most affordable range, but I guess it's sort of, the market is asking for a little bit more money. But until then, I don't know.
Or a partner comes along.
Yeah, look, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, partner with a not-for-profit or someone like that, whether it's a 50-50 or whatever. I would, with an option to purchase the other 50 down the track. They're all options, and nothing's off the table.
Yeah. Well, you've been battling through. So where does this put the future of LJB property development? You think, like, have you been put off, or you think you're still going to tackle these types of projects, or where do you?
I still want to do it.
Yeah.
The fight hasn't gone. The interest is still there. I guess. The good thing is, as far as the delay, one bonus is that the land value should go up, which is I guess one positive. But yeah, and unfortunately I can't do other sites until this one's done. Otherwise, I'd just be in too much financial stress.
Yeah.
So doing other projects relies on this one being complete, I guess.
Right.
So for now, it's sort of hold and wait.
Right. Well, it'd be really great to get developers like you active, building homes, helping solve that housing crisis. So let's just hope that you can find a way through. And if there's anything I can do, obviously, to help, I will. But yeah, anyway, thanks for coming in and outlining all these challenges and some potential solutions too. So let's keep working on it and see if we can actually put in policies and ideas that get houses built. So thanks for coming in, Layton.
No
And
worries. Thanks for your time.
yeah,
Thanks, Shane.
excellent.
Cheers.